It's been a little while since we've spoken about Hoyas on this channel, so I thought I would come in and show you my entire Hoya collection. Now, the last time you would have seen a video like this, I think I had most of these Hoyas, but the collection has definitely grown a lot. And some that I spoke about in my previous video, you will see that they have actually grown quite a lot. Some of them have been cut back, but I'll just show you what it looks like right now as of July 2023. Now, I know that Hoya aren't for everybody. Some people definitely prefer the philodendron and the anthuriums and other genuses of plants, but trust me, just stick with this video, have a look, and you might find something that you're interested in. What is up, guys? My name is Lithius and welcome to Roots Ready. So what I'm going to do is start off with the original collection, those that have been with me for a long time. I doubt I'm going to remember the exact order that I actually purchased these plants in, but I'll do my best to give a good representation. And we're going to start right here with this one. This is one of the oldest Hoya in my collection. This is the Hoya CV Jennifer. Now, when I first purchased this plant, I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much as I did, but when I first got it, I remember getting quite a large leaf, something like this. And what first drew me to this plant on eBay where I purchased it was the venation. Now, I got really into, one of the things that I really like about Hoya is just the different leaf shapes. The venation, and some of them have some really wonderful splashing on there, giving me that sort of variegated vibe that I really enjoy growing in my collection. Now, this plant, as you can see, has been with me maybe 2 years, maybe a bit longer, and he's done a lot of growing. I've actually had to cut this plant back. Most recently, there was another leaf just here, and I've cut that back and I've given it to somebody. But yes, it's been growing quite quickly. I think it did take a little while to take off, but once it did, it sort of just never looked back. I've had one peduncle on this plant. It did start to produce some new flowers for me, but unfortunately, I think I was reshuffling my shelf. I moved it, and the thing with Hoya, once you move them, they're going to stop whatever they're doing. If they're putting out a new leaf, they're not going to continue with that journey. If they're putting out a peduncle, especially, any change in light, temperature, anything will just make it reject that growth. I really do, as I say, love the larger leaves on there. Some of them are measuring about 15 to 20 centimeters. You can see here that it's kind of getting a little bit smaller, and that's just because I'm losing that sort of space to grow this plant vertically, hence the makeshift trellis that I've made here from just a metal coat hanger. So that's something that I was able to do quite easily, zero cost. And my plant seems to be doing okay. And that was the first plant, the Hoya CV Jennifer. Next up is the Hoya FINLAYSONII. Now, this may have well been the first Hoya that I ever purchased. And again, it was because of the larger leaves, the venation on the leaves, and also what this one has that I find the Jennifer doesn't do as much of, although it can, is it definitely has a bit more of that splashing. Now, you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. Just have a look at that venation, that nice deeper green that sort of runs throughout the leaf. And you can see on this newer leaf here that we have some of that beautiful splashing, especially when that leaf is coming out. It's kind of still leathery, shiny, and it just looks really pretty. Now, if you had seen this plant before, especially in one of my previous videos, you would have known that this plant was a lot bigger, maybe around the size of the FINLAYSONII. I actually went and did a heavy prune on this plant and cut it right back to just one leaf. I will show you the other cuttings actually to show you how they're doing. The reason why I did that, I was getting a little bit nervous because the plant, some of the leaves started yellowing and it wasn't looking really super healthy. So I decided to cut it back and try again. And to my success, we have some new leaves. Some of the cuttings have actually taken hold, which is really good, which means I can now potentially add this back into the pot and grow it out a bit more, or just share it out with some other people that really love the FINLAYSONII as much as I do. Here are the other FINLAYSONII. You can see that one, there you go, hasn't made it, so I'll just throw that leaf to the side. But actually, No, this one is pretty much dead. Once the leaf goes in propagation, I think that's pretty much it. In my experience, you don't get a second chance with these plants. But as you can see, all apart from one has actually rooted and grown new leaves. Like you can see one here, we can see a new leaf here and one there, and they all seem to be trying to vine out as well. So that's really, really good news in my opinion anyway. And you can see how big the leaves were, how big they started to get to. This is about a 15 centimeter leaf, so quite large. So I think I'm getting to the point where I might need to take it out of this propagation cup, which is just filled with pon and a little bit of leca, I believe, and just put them in a pot where they can really stretch their roots out and grow. So that was it. This is the Hoya FINLAYSONII, a wonderful plant to grow, and apart from my little, I don't know what went wrong, where the leaf started yellowing, but apart from that, it's been a joy to grow. It truly has. Next up is the Hoya VILLOSA, and it's a gorgeous plant. Probably up there with one of my favorite Hoya. One of the reasons I really love this plant, it's got a lovely fuzzy texture to it. Now, the camera may not pick this up, but it's really fuzzy on the back, and that fuzz sort of carries over to the top of the leaf, where it's just, it just feels really great. I love touching it. It's like a soft little teddy bear or something. Something else I really love about this plant is just how quickly it grows. It must be one of the easiest Hoyas to grow. I'll put it as the second easiest Hoya to grow in my collection. Now, you can see it here looking really cute and compact. And then all of a sudden, this thing will just explode. It will just grow out a really long tendril and it will just take over. It was sitting on this metal shelf that I have here. And before I cut this plant back to just 2 leaves, it took over the entire thing. And it's probably only been about a month or maybe a month or 2 since I've propagated this plant back. And you can already see all of this new growth. So basically pretty much everything apart from this leaf is new growth. So it's a really resilient plant. It grows very, very quickly, and the leaves are just gorgeous. Really, a really different shape. That elongated leaf almost looks like a Twinkie or something. It's something that's really different, and I really do enjoy growing this plant. I said that the VILLOSA was probably my second most resilient plant. The first and most resilient plant, I think it has to be this one. This is the Hoya MATHILDE. I think I got this as just a one node cut in, and it's absolutely taken off in my collection. Have a look at that. Now, the reason why I've said that this plant is probably the most resilient plant is when I first got it and I put it in here to grow and propagate, grow some roots out, I would just, without looking in the cash pole, I would just water the plant. And I'll come back the next week and I'll water it again without looking, because I would assume that it dries out as quickly as my other Hoya. And it didn't. Eventually, I decided to look in the cash bowl, and this thing was sitting in about 1.5 inches of water, just sitting in there. Now, you know, Hoya do not like to have their roots stay wet for too long. For many, it's a death sentence. But this one actually hung in there. And it showed no sign of decline. It was absolutely fine. Naturally, I threw out that water, and I've managed the way that I've watered this plant, and it's like nothing has ever happened. This plant is really, really resilient, really, really strong, and it was tucked away in the corner on the floor where it doesn't get access to tremendous amount of light. And now that I've put it underneath a grow light, it's starting to really sort of take off again and giving me some really wonderful splashing. So that was the Hoya MATHILDE. I'm still on the lookout for a super, super splashy MATHILDE, but until then, I'm going to give this one, blast it with loads and loads of light just to encourage as much of that splash out as possible. But if I do get my hands on a really, really splashy one, I will grab it. A Hoya that was on my list for pretty much forever, one of the first ones that really drew me into the Hoya hobby, or the Hoya collecting hobby, was this one. This is the Hoya PHUWUAENSIS, previously known as the Hoya PHUWA. That's when I first sort of fell into it, found it, and thought, oh, this is really, really interesting. And at that time, it was really difficult to find it. So when I did eventually get my hands on this, or see it pop up on eBay, had to grab it, had to get it in my collection. And here it is. Honestly, when I first got this thing, it was probably the slowest Hoya in my collection. The slowest thing ever. But recently, in the last, once it sort of really felt comfortable and gets used to the environment that it's growing in this case, this is actually growing in leca. I might need to up pot this because it dries out really, really quickly. Maybe within like a day or two, and then I don't water it for a week. But if I can get it in something that it can sort of regulate that water a bit better, I think it will grow even faster. But anyway, I went off on a tangent there. This plant has now just taken off in my collection. It's grown so much, and you can see how many times I've had to wrap this thing around itself, around this tendril. But every time I do so, and let me know, Hoya collectors out there, let me know if you find this the same thing. When you wrap your Hoya around the trellis, do you find that it stops growing new leaves? Because you can see here, when it starts growing, I may wrap it around, and then it's just bald on this side. It just doesn't want to grow. And I know Hoya sort of like to stretch out and climb up. If they feel like they're growing downwards, they won't put the energy into growing leaves on that side. So for whatever reason, I just need to figure out a different growing approach to this plant, with this plant. But yeah, it's fine. It's alive. It's healthy. It's doing really, really well. I've had this plant in my collection maybe about 2 years, maybe a bit more, give or take. And maybe it was only in the last year or so that I've started to have peduncles on this thing. I can see that it's already pushing out quite a few peduncles. I can already see 1, 2. This one looks like it's pretty much dead. 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, this just about 5, 6, 7 peduncles on here. So whatever I'm doing seems to be working for this plant. Maybe keeping it really dry is making it think that it needs to really push out its energy into peduncles or something. But it seems to be doing really well, and it hasn't missed a beat. As I've said, I've had this plant coming on to 3 years now, and it's just been absolutely fine, the dream to grow. If I could, I would let this thing trellis up as much and as high as it wanted to, try to get as bushy as possible, but unfortunately I don't have that space to allow it to do so. But yeah, for now it's doing well. It does need a haircut. I have promised one of my planty friends a cutting of this. Maybe a couple of cuttings actually. Don't tell her I said that. But yeah, I'll get some of these down. But it won't make a big difference because there's just so much going on here. So many tendrils to trim from. This right here is the Hoya SARAWAK. I got this at the first plant swap event. And it had a huge other leaf on it. That leaf fell off. This other leaf hang on for dear life. I've had this in pond, in leca, in water. I've had it in a lot of different mixtures because this was a plant that has been on my list for a long, long time. And you know, when that first leaf fell off, I was a bit like, fine, just stick it in soil. Whatever happens, happens. But it held on in there throughout the whole winter. And now that summer's here, we can see that we have a new growth coming out. I'm not going to touch this plant too much. I'm going to make sure that when I'm done with this video, I'm going to put it back in the exact same spot it was, so you can get the exact amount of light that it was getting, that it was used to, because I don't want this thing to decline and die on me. Because of all the Hoyas that I have, I think this one has the potential to have the biggest, most beautiful leaves if it's taken care of properly. So we will see where we end up with this plant and how it does. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that it does well. I'm going to keep watering it, making sure that I don't water it too much. Maybe once a week, as I have been doing, which seems to be working for it, because yes, we have a new growth, and we'll see how we get on. This is the Hoya SARAWAK. This right here is the Hoya RINTZII Bruno, a plant that I actually sort of just fell upon. I remember speaking to a planty friend, and they mentioned that this was a plant that they had on their wish list. And when I saw it, I was like, instantly, whoa, I need that. And I need it in my collection now. The reason is, I don't know what it is, but the leaf just looks really different. It's got that smooth texture, that deep purple. It's also got that splashing along here. Just the shape of it. It looks really, I don't know. It reminds me of like a pebble at the beach. Really smooth, round. You just want to touch it. You just want to hold it. You want to have it in your hand. It's that sort of, that feeling of, I don't know. It just takes, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I knew I needed to have it. And it's been in my collection for a little while, and it was doing absolutely nothing. And only recently, in the past couple of weeks, maybe month or so, it started to put up this very, very long tendril, which I'm going to be careful. I can see some baby leaves on there, but we have a couple of leaves at least that have popped out, and then some really juvenile ones lower down. So I want to be careful that I don't damage any of them, because I want them to grow. I want a number of these. If I can, I would love to have a really bushy rinsing Bruno Hoya in my collection. I try not to bother it too much and just let it do its thing, because the last thing I want to do is, as I say, is do anything that can just sort of risk how this plant is growing. So this is it. I'm going to put it back down carefully, because yeah, let me know if you've got this in your collection, if you have any tips as well, because I haven't seen many people talk about this plant on YouTube. This right here is the Hoya Wilbur Graves, and it's probably battling for this top spot in terms of my favorite Hoya in my collection, and that's probably going to go between the VILLOSA, this one, the rinsing Bruno that we just spoke about. I'm just looking at them on the floor right now. Oh, maybe the Clemensorium, which I'm going to get onto next, but yeah, this one is, it's up there. It's up there with one of my favorite Hoyas, just because of that splashing. Look at that baby. Ooh, wait! You can see that some of them are beginning to sun stress, just because it's literally touching the grow light where it's growing. Ah, it's just such a beauty. It's such a beautiful plant. It almost reminds me of the Hoya AH07 something. Do you remember when that plant was all the rage? Do you remember? Last year during like the lockdown period, do you remember how that plant was crazy? And now I've got something that's just as, even maybe more, arguably more beautiful than that plant. And oh, yeah, I'm really glad. I'm really proud of this plant. How quickly it grows. I believe it's one of the CALLISTOPHYLLA variety as well. Comes from that. It has that lineage in it. And when any plant that has that in it, it means it's going to be a very fast grower, quite resilient. So, yeah, this one, don't sleep on it. The Hoya Wilbur Graves, a great one to add to your collection, whether or not you are a Hoya lover. Get it? Well, we of course can't forget the OG, one of the original ones. One of the ones I keep coming back to in various different points on this channel is this one right here. This is the Hoya Crinkle 8. Look at this thing. You can see the growth. You can see how much this plant just wants to keep on growing and pushing out. I had to cut it back several times because this thing is off balance, right? Because most of the weight is on one side. So I've had to keep propping this thing and trying to add some plants at this side just to sort of even it out. It's kind of working, I've propped it and I've given some cuttings to my mum, to my aunt, and they seem to love the plant as well. But not only is it giving me loads of growth, loads of leaves, it's also giving me lots and lots of peduncles. This thing is non-stop. You can already see a couple that are still here, some on the way as well. This morning only, I had to go through and sort of pull off the last remaining bits of another peduncle, because once the flowers start to go, they're gone. It's like they go yellow and then they're all on the floor within a couple of hours. So to avoid that, I just had to go pluck the remaining ones off because they had already started to make a mess on the floor. But this plant is, I said the Mathilde was probably one of the most resilient ones, but this thing here, this thing is bulletproof. I'm telling you, it's bulletproof. I can go without watering this thing. I'm sure I won't do this, but I'm sure I can go without watering this thing for a month and I'll come back and it'll still be, in fact, not only would it look the same, it would have even grown. This is how crazy this plant is. It's insane just how much this plant just wants to grow. For example, this cutting here, usually when you propagate Hoyas, you want to propagate maybe a leaf or two because you don't want it to sort of suck up too much water through the leaves and so on. It just gives it a better chance. But I chuck a whole branch in here and it went really soft on me, like it was about to die. And now it's growing. Like all of them are growing. Yeah. Get yourself a Crinkle 8. This one might not be a pure Crinkle 8, but whichever one is going to serve you well. Trust me. And it's a gorgeous hanging plant as well. So another one that I would highly recommend to have in your collection. The Hoya latifolia. is an interesting plant. Like, what I really got this plant for was these big dinner plate like leaves, thinking it would sort of rival the Sarawak. This one has not done so yet. Although we're growing, it's getting larger and larger by the day. It's just taking a bit of time. It's a bit of a slower grower in terms of when you look at it compared to some of my other Hoyas, but it's still a lovely one. I've had to make a few propagations from this one for various, for example, for the previous plant swap show, I took a couple of cuttings for that, and a couple just to sort of sell on my eBay store. So yeah, lots of cutting have been made, which is why this plant isn't like the bushiest that it could be. One thing about this Hoya is that it's probably the stickiest in my collection. This stem, you can see where it's got those nectaral, I forgot what you call it, but the nectar that is sort of oozes on its stem. And I think this is to do with like a symbiotic relationship with ants in the forest, because it's quite sweet. Look, it's very sweet. I will say, oh, oof, maybe don't go around tasting the sap that grows off your plants, but it is quite sweet. So you can tell that it's there to, you know, for a purpose. It serves a purpose. And this plant I've had for a while, and as I said, it's a little bit of a slower grower, and it's only recently that it started to really take off. And again, this is at this point I want to sort of tendril this thing around itself, but it just doesn't seem to like that at all, because when I do so, it just stops growing, and it was maybe just pushes energy to this one until this one gets too long and I'm gonna have to wrap it around. And another thing about this plant is that it gets super thirsty. It dries out really quickly, but I don't water it as quickly as it dries out. I let it sit in its dryness for a while before watering it again, and that seems to work well for all of my Hoyas. They don't particularly, as I said, they don't like to have their feet wet for too long, so be careful with that. Don't be too nervous to let them dry out for a little bit, especially during this hot summer's like period that we're going through right now. Just leave it for a little while, and hopefully it will start to take off like mine has this summer. Jumping in quickly with a plant that I forgot. This is the Hoya obovata. Completely forgot about this plant because I've had to do some emergency repotting on this thing in the past couple of months. I realized that this plant actually came down with a case of mealybugs. I only found maybe one or two, but that was enough for me to completely take the plant out of its pot, just prop it all the way back. So all of these cuttings here are propagations, and I stuck it in water for a while, making sure that there's nothing else that can go in there. And I've only recently repotted this thing back into soil, so hence why it's not looking its best. But I couldn't miss this one out. This was a Hoya that was on my list for a very long time. Here we have the Hoya CLEMENSIORUM, also known, I think it's called the dragon something Hoya. I'm not too sure, but I think the reason it's called that is because of the leaf. The venation on the leaf makes it look really prehistoric. Have a look at that. And this plant, it does get some ridges on the edge. I don't know if this is the exact same species that does it, but I have seen some that when they grow really long, and they get those sort of ridges, almost like teeth on the edge of the, you can kind of see here, just really like interesting ripples. Yeah, on this one you can kind of maybe see a little bit of a ripple. Now, when the last time you guys may have seen this plant, it was bigger, had lots more leaves on there. I've had to again cut this down for a few trades. This actually isn't the mother plant. I've actually sold the mother plant as well as a couple of other cuttings, and I've kept this one just because, again, these Hoyas tend to grow so quickly that I need to sort of pull back on the size that they can grow to, just so that I can actually accommodate them in the restrained space that I have in my house. But this is really one of the rarer Hoyas, and I can see why. It's really like just a beautiful plant to have in your collection. Again, this one likes to tendril, in my experience, grow really long after it sort of gets a good stable base. And its roots are well established, it just tendrils up. So you have to be careful with that. It's not a look that I particularly like. I like it a bit more compressed and like a condensed growth pattern. So for that, I will keep chopping and propping this plant as much as I need to. This is the Hoya CALLISTOPHYLLA, a plant that I got in the recent plant trade. This one again was all the rage during the Hoya boom, and you can see why. Again, it's that deep. I think it's just the contrast between the veins and the leaf that I really enjoy, and I guess a lot of other people really enjoy. This one I've had for a few months now, and it took a while before it actually started to grow a new leaf. So I'm really happy that that's come through now. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed so that it can actually grow hard enough and, you know, continue to go, because with these things it just takes the slightest mishap to move your finger in the wrong place and the leaf is gone, or it doesn't get access to the right amount of light and it's gone. It gets overwatered and it's gone. Any sort of major drastic changes, this thing will just completely reject the leaf. So really happy that this was coming through. It was one that, you know, I've seen a lot of as I came up through the, you know, watching YouTube, and I first got, you know, really into plants. So I'm really happy to have this one in my collection, and hopefully that it just keeps growing and gets as bushy as some of these other plants in my collection. Now these two, they're not the same thing, and I've sort of misplaced the label for these two, but I have them growing right next to each other. And they are doing just fine. So these are some of the most recent recruits to my collection. This one, interestingly enough, had a really gorgeous peduncle on it. Had a really interesting scent as well, quite sweet, very fragrant. But that's now fallen off. I can't really see the peduncle anymore where that was. So maybe the entire thing fell off, who knows. So these last maybe 8 leaves here are completely new since I've had this plant in my collection. So again, a really strong grower, one that I'm really proud of. And this is another one, again, I've misplaced the label for this one. But I remember when I planted it up, I had it wrapped around because it was quite long, in the hopes that each of those nodes will take off and grow a new shoot. I can't see any sign of new growth on this one yet, but it's hanging in there. It's doing well. It hasn't died. It hasn't declined. It should be working on some really good roots. So I imagine in the next couple of months we might have a couple of new growth coming from this one. So I've got 2 Hoya in here. This one is the SIGILLATIS on this side, which is doing really well and has that lovely red tinge on the leaf. I love the long leaf on this one. I have seen on some images of people having some really bushy baskets of this one. Again, something I'm hoping to get really soon. And this one is the ROTUNDIFLORA, very similar shape to the VILLOSA that I showed earlier, but a lot smaller, a lot more compact in its growth. So I think that will make a nice little contrast between the two. It's still in my mini greenhouse, doing well, no signs of decline, new growth, so that's a really good sign. This right here is the Hoya LACUNOSA, again growing in my grow tent, or in my greenhouse rather, my mini greenhouse. You can see that it has a lot of access to humidity because you can see those roots sort of taking up all over the stem. It's all rooted out. The roots are growing long, and that's just because of the amount of humidity that it has in that thing. Although the soil tends to get quite dry, I think it just remains quite humid in there. So this thing is growing really well, and I think it's nearly time for a repot for this one, and it might have to be one of those ones where I sort of wrap it around itself in the pot, just so that it can all of those roots can find a home, and this thing can just sort of take off. So for now, I'll just keep it like this. I've just wrapped it around just in this video, and I think it might like that. So yeah, we'll see. A really interesting one. I like the small leaves. Reminds me of the MATHILDE. It could be quite interesting to have the contrast of the mini leafed Hoya together. Maybe in the future I might put them all in one pot and see how they contrast. Who knows? Maybe an idea for a video in the future. This right here is the PARVIFLORA. And again, I got this one at the recent plant swap. You can see again like lots and lots of roots coming out through the tendril over there. So again, you can see that it's got access to lots and lots of humidity. This plant is just, this one and the one I showed recently, completely taken over that mini greenhouse. It's not big, there's not much space, so this thing is just tendriling all over the inside of that thing. So eventually I'm going to have to find a way just to sort of contain that growth. Again, I might try to just wrap it around itself. Just see what I can do just to encourage that thing. There we go, just like that. Look at that. Will that work? What do you think? Just like this, yeah, just keep it compact a little bit, just so that it can all fit. And until I find some space, I don't know, we'll see. I want to bring them all out of the greenhouse, but for now, space is the limiting factor here. So until then, we'll just keep them in there. And if they get too big, I'll bring them out. This is the Hoya Parasitica Black Edge. I hope I've said that one right. Again, with the roots, you can tell when these plants are growing that it's got access to a lot of humidity, which is good. It means that I can actually propagate these ones if I wanted to, and have them all in their own pots. This one, for whatever reason, is super thirsty. Super thirsty. Like before this video, I had to soak this moss, which is still in water, and it's already taken up every last bit of that water, and it still feels a little bit dry. It's insane. So I think I will keep it in here, just leave a little reservoir and put it back in the tent, and hopefully it will just take up all of that water, and it will just keep growing. I don't want it to stop its growth. It's on a good trajectory, lots of leaves, lots of tendrils, lots of roots. So that's all really good signs. So yeah, this is it. I love the black edge on this one, really different. It almost reminds you of like that turtle shell effect. So this one has the sort of almost like a turtle effect, just like some ribs on there, some abs that I really enjoy. Very similar, gives me like a little bit of the Crinkle 8 vibe as well. So I'm kind of down with it, I'm kind of feeling it. But yes, that is it. That is all the Hoyas in my collection. I hope I haven't missed any. I may have missed one or two, but hopefully it gives you an idea of flavor of what I'm working with, and it will, you know, for those that are on the edge about Hoyas, hopefully tips you over in the Hoya camp. But that was it. That was everything that I have to show you in regards to my Hoya. If you're looking for some more specific care details, how I look after these things, I will say it's not as difficult as you think. Let me know, and I'll make a dedicated video on any one of these Hoyas that you're really interested in. Let me know, and I'll make sure that I'll sort that out for you in a couple of weeks' time. But that was it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep planting.